There comes a moment in every man's life, sometimes at 25, sometimes at 45, where he looks in the mirror and realizes he's done everything right. He's worked on himself. He's checked the boxes. He's pushed through pain. He's outgrown bad habits, and maybe he's even started therapy or gone to the gym. And from the outside, it looks like progress. In some ways, it is. But on the inside, there's still a silence, still a hole, still a sense that something is off. That despite all the improvement, you're still not okay. You're not fully, not deeply, and honestly okay. This episode begins at that moment, in that quiet discomfort. The moment when the mirror reflects not your appearance, but it reflects your wound. Because what I'm talking about today is not just healing, I'm talking about why healing must precede wholeness, and why so many men are trying to earn love through self-improvement, but really they're just outrunning the parts of themselves that they're still afraid to face. Now, this is not a condemnation of hard work. It's not a takedown of personal growth, but it's a reckoning with what happens when all of that growth is built on top of shame. Because you can discipline your way into better habits. You can goal set your way to career wins. You can even confidence train your way into more social success. But none of that will feel like belonging, like if you've never actually looked at the part of yourself that still feels unworthy or of being seen. And let me be clear, this I don't think is your fault. See, many men were taught very early on that emotions are distractions, that pain is weakness, that feeling is deeply feminine. So instead of processing, they push. Instead of grieving, they just grind. And we call it masculinity, but really, it's fear that's dressed up in armor. And what happens next is actually quite predictable. You see, the man who is hurting builds himself this fortress, and he becomes stronger and more productive and more independent. But also he becomes more alone. Because the deeper truth is this: you can't connect while hiding. You can't be loved while you're all armored up. You can't feel safe while you're avoiding the wound. And many of us have spent years learning how to impress. And when what we actually long for is just to be held. But there's a cost to performing instead of healing, isn't there? See, eventually the wound begins to leak out anyways, and maybe it shows up in explosive anger or in emotional withdrawal or this inability to trust the love that someone is actually trying to give you. Maybe you sabotage relationships because you're afraid of being seen. And maybe you criticize yourself relentlessly, even after success. And maybe you secretly hate the man in the mirror. Not because he's failing, but because he's hurting. And no one ever told you that it's okay to hurt. That it's okay to say, I'm not okay, I'm actually scared, I'm alone, I want to be loved and I don't know how to receive it. See, you don't need more willpower, you need more compassion. And that begins with looking at the wound itself. Not avoiding it, not masking it, not trying to conquer it, just being honest about it. And that honesty is where healing begins. But honesty is scary, especially when you've spent your whole life learning that your worth is measured by what you can do and not what you feel. And so when the feelings come, like grief or loneliness, fear, rejection, you tell yourself to just get over it, to man up, to push through, and in doing so, you become a stranger to your own heart. And you stop trusting your emotions and you stop listening to your body. You start believing that you shouldn't feel what you feel. And that's not strength. That's what I call suppression. And suppression always demands a cost. Suppression, it robs you of softness. It robs you of connection and it robs you of intimacy. And the truth is, no matter how much you achieve, if your motivation is rooted in trying to prove your worth rather than trying to feel it, you'll always be haunted by a quiet fear that says that if you stop performing, you'll stop mattering. That if you slow down, people will stop caring. That if you're real, like you're raw, unpolished, emotionally exposed, you'll be rejected. And here's where this gets tragic. A lot of the men who end up in radical spaces like incel forums and like manosphere and echo chambers, even like with extremist ideologies, they didn't start out angry. They actually started out wounded. They started out longing to be chosen, longing to be loved, longing to be seen as human. But when that longing met rejection, when that tenderness met cruelty, they buried it. And instead of grieving, they armored up. And they built this entire belief systems to protect themselves from ever needing to feel that pain again. And they replaced connection with control. They replaced vulnerability with vengeance. And they replaced hope with harshness. And that's how the wound metastasizes into something dangerous. Because an unhealed wound doesn't just sit quietly, it festers. It distorts how you see others, how you see yourself, and how you think love is supposed to work. So you tell yourself that you're a victim, or you tell yourself you're a warrior, or you tell yourself you're the last good man in a world that doesn't value men anymore. But underneath every narrative, every ideology is the same pain. Why wasn't I enough? That's the wound. Not the rejection, not the loneliness, not the lack of sex or romantic connection. The real wound is the meaning that you made from those things. The belief that you were unworthy, that you are still unworthy. That's the wound that no performance can erase. So what do we do with it? What do we do when we finally reach the point where self-help isn't helping anymore? When therapy feels too slow and when hustling just feels hollow. We do the one thing that we were never taught to do, and that's we stop. Not permanently, not dramatically. We do this gently though. We stop performing. We stop fixing. We stop curating this version of ourselves that is always in control. And instead we start listening. Listening to the boy inside who never felt safe. Listening to the young man who was told that his tears were weakness. Listening to the adult who still does not know what it feels like to be held without any conditions. That's the moment that the real healing begins. Not when you add more tools to your kit, but when you drop the armor. Because the wound isn't healed through intellect. It's healed through presence. Someone seeing you and not flinching. Someone loving you without needing you to be impressive. Someone who's witnessing your shame and still staying with you in the discomfort. And that someone has to be you first. You can't receive unconditional love from others if you've never actually offered it to yourself. So what does that even look like though? It looks like sitting with the pain instead of numbing it. It looks like naming the pain without trying to justify it. It looks like being the one person in your own life who doesn't turn away when it hurts the most. See, you don't have to excavate your trauma in one go. You don't have to have all the answers. But you do have to stop pretending that it doesn't matter. Because here's the thing. If you don't heal the wound, you're going to build your entire life around protecting that wound. Every relationship will become a test. Every compliment will feel like a trap. Every challenge will feel like proof that you're not enough. And that's not living. That's managing. That's surviving. And you deserve way more than survival. You deserve peace. Not just a quiet kind of peace, but the one that reaches your soul. You deserve connection And not just attention, but intimacy. You deserve love, not just admiration, but actually being known. And all of that starts with a choice. And I'm not talking about the dramatic kind of choice, not the overnight transformation, but the quiet, steady, defiant decision to stop running, to stop building your worth on top of your wound, to stop believing that more success will finally silence the shame. It won't. Only your presence will. And presence doesn't mean passivity. It means showing up honestly, showing up to your own story, showing up to your own grief, to the parts of yourself that you've been trying to bypass this whole time. And presence, though quiet, is the bravest thing you could ever do. Because when you stop performing, you have to feel again. And feeling, especially after years of suppression, can feel like drowning. Like the sadness you've buried, the rage you've muted, the fear that you've denied, they all rise to the surface, not to destroy you, but just to be seen. And yes, it is overwhelming at first, because for years your coping mechanism was just distance. How can I get away from this? You distance from your body, you distance from your emotions, you distance from your own needs. And now you're being asked to come back. You're being asked to come back to feel the heaviness in your chest and not to numb it, to hear the inner critic and not obey it, to notice the pain and stay. This is why healing is not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. And there are men listening right now who've done everything that they were told to do. They've fixed their posture. They've improved their finances. They've read the books. They've built the muscles. They've polished their voice and their online profile. But they're still lonely. They're still angry. They're still tired. And that's not because they haven't worked hard enough. It's because they've been working around the wound instead of working on and with the wound. So you can't build enough success to feel safe, because safety is not earned. It's actually created. It's created inside of you, by you, through honesty, through compassion, through permission. Permission to be a man and still feel pain. Permission to be driven and still be able to cry. Permission to be strong and still express needs. That's not weakness. That is maturity. But many of us didn't learn that. We were trained instead to seek approval by denying our humanity. And so when people praise your discipline, your progress, and your grind, you soak it up. But deep down, part of you still wonders, if they saw the scared version of me, would they still stay, right? And that fear keeps you stuck. It convinces you to keep performing, to keep optimizing, to keep hiding behind improvement. But improvement without intimacy is just another form of isolation. And real intimacy, it starts with being seen, mess and all. And that's why you can't outperform the wound, because the wound isn't asking for a better performance. The wound is asking for your presence. It's asking for you to say something like this: I see you and I believe you, and you don't have to do anything impressive to matter. This is where shame begins to unravel. Not because you've achieved more, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. And maybe no one taught you how to do that. Maybe no one ever held you that way. Maybe your caregivers didn't know how to attune to your pain. Maybe your peers laughed when you cried. And so you learned not to feel, not to ask, not to need. But your wound still remembers. Your body remembers. Your breath remembers. The way you flinch at closeness remembers. And until you see that wound, and until you're willing to acknowledge it, to hold it, to honor it, you will keep living from that wound. You'll keep sabotaging connection. You'll keep fearing rejection. You'll keep chasing success. Not because you want to thrive per se, but because you're terrified of being unwanted. And that's the lie that keeps so many men trapped. They say, if I become just a bit more impressive, then I'll finally be loved. But love doesn't come to the most impressive version of you. It actually comes to the most honest version of you. And that version, he might be messy. He might be scared. He might be unsure. But I'll tell you, that version is real. And real is what people can hold. Real is what people can love. The mask might earn applause, but it will never feel like intimacy. The performance might win followers, but it will never quiet the ache. Because no matter how well you play the part, you will always feel lonely if the real you is not invited. So what now? Well, you acknowledge the wound and you don't analyze it to death. You don't try to fix it overnight. Just name it. Maybe that sounds like this. I feel like I was never enough. Or, I hate that I always have to prove myself. Or, I'm just tired of pretending that I'm okay. And you see, when you name it, there comes this softening. You soften to the boy who needed love and didn't get it. You soften to the man who carried too much for too long. You soften to the truth that you've tried to hide this whole time. And from that softness, something sacred emerges, and that's self-acceptance. Not because you're perfect, not because you've earned it, not because you feel like you've worked for it, but because you exist. And existing in a full, honest, vulnerable way is enough. It doesn't mean you stop growing. It just means that growth no longer comes from shame. It comes instead from love. And that shift, it changes everything. When growth is rooted in love, it looks different. You're not grinding to be worthy. You're growing because you already are worthy. You're not proving something to the world. You're actually nurturing something on the inside. And that inner shift, while it may be invisible to others, becomes the foundation of everything that's visible in your life. And you start showing up in relationships differently. No longer are you afraid to be seen. You're no longer trying to earn safety. You're not trying to earn safety through perfection, and you're not addicted to control. You're instead taking deeper breaths, having slower conversations, making eye contact with softness instead of suspicion. Because you're no longer performing, you're actually now present. And you begin to forgive yourself more easily, not because you're excusing bad behavior, but because you finally understand that the shame does not heal you. It's compassion that heals you. You find the courage to say things like, I don't know, or I'm hurt, or I'm still learning, or I need help. And suddenly, connection doesn't feel so impossible anymore because you've stopped making perfection a prerequisite for love. You also stop needing to hear others tear you down to feel tall. You stop resenting the people who seem happy or attractive or chosen because you're no longer measuring your value by their journey. You've come home to yourself. And in doing so, you stop building your worth on rejection and you start instead building it on reality. Reality says you're a human being with needs, with longings, with pain. And none of that disqualifies you from love. In fact, it's the doorway into love. See, so many of these ideologies are built to protect men from hurt, like the red pill, blackfoot pill, hypermasculinity. And they're all actually just hiding places for their wounds. They offer neat explanations and they offer villains to blame and hierarchies to master. But what they don't offer is healing. They don't hold space for grief. They don't teach how to repair trust. They don't offer the safety of being known without needing to win. And that's where integrity and intimacy come in. Integrity is living in alignment, not just between your values and your actions, but also between your outer strength and your inner truth. And intimacy is letting yourself be seen, not the filtered version, not the curated version, but the version of you that still longs for tenderness, still hopes to be chosen, still aches to belong. That version of you is not weak. He's worthy. And the moment that you stop running from him is the moment you start healing. You start connecting. You start living. Not behind a mask, not on a pedestal, but in ordinary, sacred space of human truth. And I know that might feel foreign. I mean, it even sounds terrifying because you've spent years outrunning this moment and filling your calendar and perfecting your appearance and sharpening your edges. But the most courageous thing you could do today is stop, to get quiet, to get honest, to ask yourself, what part of me have I been trying to improve away because I was too afraid to love it? And then to love that part anyway, not because it's easy, not because your healing is not optional. It's actually urgent. But it's because until you heal, you will repeat and you will project and you will punish yourself for not being who you think you should be. But when you do heal, when you stop performing, when you start witnessing your own pain with compassion, it's then that you finally become someone that you can trust, someone that you can love, someone that you feel safe to be around. And that's the real glow up, if you will. Not a sharper jawline, not a better job, not a curated confidence, but the quiet strength of a man who is no longer at war with himself. See, that man does not chase love. He actually creates it. That man does not fear intimacy. He welcomes it. That man does not build walls around his wound. He actually opens the door. And then others can feel it. And you become the kind of man others feel safe with, a man that they can relax around, a man whose presence heals, not because he has all the answers, but because he finally stopped hiding. You in essence stop trying to earn belonging because now you actually embody it. And that's the invitation that this episode holds for you. Not to stop growing, but to stop growing away from yourself. To come home, to look your wound in the eye and to say, you are not a weakness. You are not a flaw. You are part of me that I abandoned once, and I'm here now. That's where it all begins, because you can't outperform the wound that you refuse to heal. Okay, you can outgrow the shame by walking toward your truth, one honest step at a time. So it's a welcome back to yourself in this episode. I hope this has served you well. Drop me your questions in the comments.